Above them shone the lights of the promenade at Mineral, great globes suspended from a single thread at intervals and sweeping arcs from post to post right across the bay. They lit the outline of the coast until reaching the cliffs marching off into the sea or the night. The Mitzies ran back to him and, "Take our hands, Porlock," they said, suddenly grasping one of his hands each. They ran towards the first post. "What on earth are we doing?" exclaimed Porlock, standing now at the bottom of the post, but the Mitzies were swarming it up the post. They seemed to have some rope looped round Porlock's waist, and they tugged it. Mystified, he followed. With reasonable safety, for he was a fine rock climber, he followed them to the top of the post. Porlock thought there couldn't possibly be room for all three of them on the perilous place, but Vag was already standing, balancing on the wires. The light from the first of the globes was shining up through his shoes and feet, and before he knew it, Porlock was balancing next to him, and Rag was stepping on too. If the Mitzies had not been so sure-footed and light and fleet of foot, he would have shinned back down the pole right there and then. They hardly seemed to dent the wires, though they were quite sturdy individuals, and Porlock happily trod very lightly on his knee. They grasped his hands to try and make him feel a little safer, and Rag took out what looked like a skateboard without any wheels, with a hole at the back. Rag took out another. Porlock had thought they looked as if they were setting up for the Arctic, or at least a long walk, but had dismissed that as a fancy of theirs that their jerkins seemed to bulge. Either that or too much of his nice teas, he had thought. And a third. They looped a length of long string to hold them together, and then Bag sat down with his legs either side of the board, and suddenly he was away and slid off along the train of lights, making extraordinary shadows that played on the shore on the road below. "Quickly, Porlock," said Rag, and Porlock had no choice but to get on the middle one, and off they both slid after Bag. "What is all this about?" muttered Porlock to himself. But the lights flew by underneath them like huge luminous bees. The rushing of the wind was exhilarating. Porlock's hair streamed out beside him, as did his long walking cape. At the next post, Bag did a sort of jump and a twist, just like a skateboarder, and the two boards followed him, jumping the post and landing neatly, and thankfully Porlock closed his eyes, back onto the wires. They went faster, and Porlock could see now that they hadn't taken leave completely of their senses, and that Mitzies or no Mitzies, this means of transport actually right. He began to relax and looked about him. The cliffs looked much bigger from this height for some reason, and the shore more distant and unreal, like the edge of a long pancake, where the bites of the sea came in like the bites of a giant, in fact. "What am I thinking?" Porlock laughed. And he carried on laughing, for the wind in his hair always made him laugh. And the wires underneath them began to sing and hum with the friction of the speed of the three sleds. The road sped by them, and it was lucky it was late on a Sunday evening, so that few people were about, and lucky still not a soul on the promenade where the wind had got up. It would have been too chilly if you were not whizzing along at a great rate and kept warm by the thrill of it. But no one was about. What a mercy that was, Porlock said to himself. And all the curtains were drawn, and the doors were shut, which was the kindest thing, and it was especially fortunate that no one from the town council was inside. The cliffs were getting alarmingly close. Though Porlock was thinking this was probably the best fairground ride he'd ever been on. The huge globes set swinging behind them, the last, the most violently, and then so on until the wires and the lights between the first two poles were just swinging in a leisurely kind of way, like a recently abandoned swing seat. Faster and faster they'd gone, but at last they did begin to slow down. Bag put rough-gloved hands on the wires, and the sleds began to drop their speed, but still they didn't stop, and they were slower, but not exactly slow. Bag ahead of him now pulled out something silky from his biggest pocket. Rag prodded Porlock from behind. "Porlock!" he shouted against the wind. "Take this! Hold tight the 4 strings!" He had passed it so swiftly that strings first, so Porlock took them and tried them in the dark, then with flashes of light from beneath, to see what in the world it could be. He hardly dared to guess, and then the lights and posts ended just ahead. Bag gave a yank, and the silk bloomed out into the shape like a tulip, upside down, and now Porlock guessed. Oh, Jehoshaphat! Bag shot off the end, and the first sled fell, and the bloom of silk filled the air. In no time at all, Porlock gave his strings a yank, and another brightly coloured plume of silk opened. "I hope it takes my weight," he thought, as the wires ended and the sled fell groundward, and then Rag was behind him, with a huge green silk bell, and they were floating on the strong current of the sea wind until gently, very gently, they came down onto the shingly shore near the cliff's feet. When their feet touched the ground, gasps of relief were mingled with the exclamations of exhilaration. Porlock stood on the stone, stood perfectly still with his eyes closed, breathing in deep the cold, salty air. The Mitzies had rolled out on the shingle, landing any which way, but now they sat up rolled in their huge silk wraps and looked at Porlock anxiously. You terrible creatures, he said, and then smiled a long, slow smile which spread over his face, and then he opened his eyes. What? Was it all right? Are you all right? Asked small voices, small with apprehension. Go on, it was a marvellous ride. The Mitzies cheered, delighted with their success. But I would have liked a little more information first, climbing up poles and sliding on wires, and coming down on parachutes. I would like some warning, thank you, that was fine. He said, good-humoured, but a glint in his eye and voice showed that he did mean it. But the Mitzies were cheering loudly and hardly noticed this additional remark. Then they cleared up the mess and stopped making so much noise in case anyone did come out to see what they were up to, and walked back along the promenade under the still rocking hammocks of the lights. Whatever gave you the idea? Asked Porlock, still cheerful but mystified. We thought you needed cheering up, some excitement. After being in Rome so long, some nightlife, the bright lights, that's what we heard cheered people up. At this, Porlock chuckled, but couldn't help groaning. Bright lights in the night? Nightlife, indeed. He supposed they were thinking of all those other metaphors. Night on tiles, paint the town red. Thank heaven they hadn't chosen the last one. He shuddered at the thought. At last they reached the main street, and this time they really did